Welcome back to One More Mana. My name is Derek, and today we are getting into another deck tech. Now, I feel like it's been forever. All honesty, I've had such huge set burnout that I've had much more fun doing other types of videos recently. Really have not been brewing as much as I used to because it just feels like there's too much. But I have been inspired thanks to one of our amazing patrons. Shout out to Uday. They had requested that we do a deck tech on Grothama, the All-Devouring. Now, Grothama is one of those cards I feel like when it got spoiled, I remember how excited everyone was about just trying to scheme and all the weird things you can do with this deck. And really the only restrictions that they had requested is that's about in the $100 to $200 range, which I think is super fair. We don't want to be building decks with cradles and mana crypts and mana vaults and everything because that's no fun. So we're gonna get into it. It's a super unique deck and it's a lot of fun to get into. Now, before we get into that though, I know you're gonna want some of the cards in this deck, or maybe insert one of the 100 sets that is released this past 2 months. You want cards from that one and you're excited about the new stuff. I know they just revealed a potential new Titania for the Brothers War, so I'm already getting excited for that. Head on over to TCG Player. They will have whatever it is you're looking for. I know I cannot keep track of what's in a collector booster, a set booster, a draft booster, a secret layer, a universe. I don't know what's in what, but what I do know is TCG Player is going to have whatever it is I'm looking for and whatever I need. If you use the affiliate link down in the description below, you can help support the channel in the process. We really do appreciate all the help. And speaking of supporting the channel, you gotta check out Into the AM. I absolutely love their stuff. I am someone who is a little picky about what I like to wear, clearly not style wise, but material, all that type of stuff. And Into the AM has been amazing. They have gotten a huge fan out of me. And as always, we have a message from Kennethy the Heathen himself to tell you why you too should rock Into the AM. Hello, my name is Kennethy the Heathen. I am here to lull you into a sense of wonder with my dulcet tones of my voice. I am here to tell you about Into the AM. Remember, as I always say, something about screaming in space and dripping. Thank you, Ken. Yeah, but Ken aside, get Into the AM. It's amazing. If you use the affiliate link down below, you can help support the channel, and use the code on screen, you can get a discount in the process. Highly do recommend. Like I said, the only compliments I've ever gotten on clothing has been when I'm rocking my Into the AM. So if it could work for me, it can work for anybody. Now, last thing we got to get to is the Magic Summit. MTG Summit is coming up very quickly. At this point, it's only a few weeks out. If you haven't already gotten tickets, get on that because you're running out of time. November 11th through 13th out in Salt Lake City. If y'all get a chance to go, it should be a great time. And if you use the code one more to help support the channel when you get tickets or sign up for events or any of that type of stuff that helps support us getting out there, staying out there, and whatever table flipping fees are incurred once we're out there. So really do appreciate it. And if you are going, please let us know. Hit us up on Twitter. We try to get better about checking that. Tweet us, DM us, whatever it is. We'll make sure to find you. We'd love to get some games with all y'all. It'd be a super great time. Honestly, cannot wait to get out there and meet everybody. But that is enough for announcements. Let's get into this deck, this Grothama All-Devouring deck. Now, Grothama is one of those cards that I love what it does politically to a table. If you're not familiar with Grothama, Grothama is 3, a green and a green for a 10/8 worm that has the text, whenever a creature attacks, instead you can have it fight Grothama. And then whenever Grothama leaves the battlefield, each player draws cards equal to the amount of damage their creatures dealt to it. Now, I think I read that more or less correctly. Basically what happens is whenever creatures attack, they fight him. When it leaves, everybody gets to draw his cards if their creatures are one of the ones that dealt damage. Now, in a normal sense, this could be seen as if someone attacks, they can just have everything fight Grothama, kill it, and then draw a bunch of cards in the process. The thing I love about this is it is a group huggish type effect on the game without the fake pretense of group hug. Group hug is not one of my, I really don't enjoy group hug decks. I don't find them fun. To each their own. It just is weird that I know you want to kill me, but you're pretending to do nice stuff for me. I'm just not buying it. But with Grothama, you know from the start the Grothama player doesn't want to help you. They are there to help themselves. It just so happens that their commander can also benefit you in the process. So what I feel like it does is it really warps the entire game in a really cool way, in that players get off of their game plans in order to, it's like putting card draw just out there and everybody's tempted by it. Drawing cards is so much damn fun. It's like if you're playing a game of Commander and someone just has like a big old pile of almond joy. No, nobody else likes almond joy. Like a big old pile of some other generic candy that people besides me like, and just sitting in the middle of the table, yeah, you're just gonna be sitting there grabbing pieces the entire time. You're not gonna be worrying about what's going on. You're gonna be distracted. And card draw is just like candy in that it's wonderful, but if you do it too much, it's probably gonna kill you. And it's just so tempting to get into it. Now, one of the coolest things is especially very linear decks. If someone has a very specific game plan, they have to be doing something on a certain curve, even a turn of them stopping what they're doing to just, you know what, let me do this instead. Use my entire turn to draw cards, and you know what, that was fun, let me do it again. It really does get people off their game plan. And if you play with streamlined decks, it sounds ridiculous because your opponents are drawing cards, but I think it actually slows down what they're trying to do because they're spending their time and effort into finding the coolest way to draw cards instead of finding the coolest way for them to win directly. Now, obviously, if you're playing against very highly tuned decks, the card draw could be lethal, but I think in more like battle cruiser type metas, this could be a super fun deck to pilot. So yeah, to kind of preface that, this is not going to be highly tuned, efficient murder machine type deck, which I feel like is hand in hand with the commander, but you can definitely do work with this deck. Now, there's going to be 3 main categories. Because of this, we want to be able to benefit from the fact that we get to fight Grothama, whether it's through cool effects or card draw. We want to punish our opponents from either them doing it or us getting the benefit of doing it, which will make more sense in a second. And we also want to make sure we can protect Grothama. I think it's really cool that your opponents have the opportunity to draw these cards and everything. We only want our opponents to draw cards when we are comfortable with it. And that's important. And that's where a lot of the protection comes in, to where we're not just giving our opponents resources. We really have to make them earn it. But enough with all that, let's jump into these categories. And let's start with the creatures. Now, I did run a lot of creature-based ramp in this deck. A lot of ramp in general, but a lot of creature-based ramp, mainly because late in the game, throwing out some mana dorks is just a few extra power to swing with, fight your commander, and draw more cards. And anytime your early game ramp can be turned into late game card draw, even if very indirectly, I think it's a wonderful benefit to have, and it really does make the pain of drawing a late game dork less painful, for lack of a better term. Now, we're gonna start with that first category I mentioned, where we want to benefit. And I love the fact that, yes, we can just use big, beefy creatures to punch our commander and draw a bunch of cards. And don't get me wrong, now, I'm not going to go through them, but there's a lot of beefy creatures in here. It's green. We got to be doing big, stompy shit. But I also like weird effects that are going to make us benefit. So a great example of this is Brood Hatch and Antuco, or Saber Ants, where when they're dealt damage, you get to just create a whole bunch of 1/1s. Normally, this is a pain because no one wants to attack you, but now we can just fight Grothama, throw 1/1s onto the board, and if these are attacking with other creatures, draw cards in the process. I'm loving what these are doing, the benefit these are giving. But we also want to punish our opponents when we're able to do stuff like this. So stuff like Stuffy Doll and Psychosis Crawler are incredible. Psychosis Crawler in general might be the best card in the deck, because if we get a big board, swing, draw 20 or 30 cards, which is super realistic, you're just throwing out 20 to 30 damage, not to mention you just have a big-ass Psychosis Crawler left at the end of it, which, with all the ways we have to give evasion, can just be lethal if anyone does survive anyway. So, just wonderful to be able to then get the payoff for drawing those cards, in addition to all those resources you're getting. Now, when I mentioned protection, protection is so crucial, and 2 of the best cards in this deck that we're going to have. One is not a surprise, it's Temur Sabertooth. This is a combo piece in a lot of decks. I just see it in this deck as being able to bounce your commander when you don't want your opponents fighting it. You can literally do your thing on your turn. Maybe you are not ready to fight it yet. Play Grothama out instead of having to hope it makes it back to you. Basically, just if you get in a situation where, okay, oh wow, this opponent just made all this power out of nowhere, bam, bounce the Grothama. Now you don't have to worry about your opponent getting benefit when you're not ready for it yet. I love what that does. And then Spear Breaker Behemoth might be my favorite, because you're just able to straight up just give Indestructible. This is huge. It's very high CMC, so it's not like you can get this out early, but the indestructibility is huge because that's by your choice. So on your turn, you can still kill your commander, draw all you want, but all you need to do is hold up a few mana to make sure opponents don't get you. And that's really what I see as a key to the deck, is when these resources are given. It's a little puzzle, and it seems like a lot of fun to solve. Now, the one beater that I do want to mention, because like, I get it, you can just throw any generic giant green creatures in here, but Mossbridge Troll specifically is absurd. Mossbridge Troll basically just reads tap your commander, give this +20/+20. So you're either going to be able to swing with 25/25, fight Grothama, draw 25 cards, or with a lot of the trample enablers and evasion we have, just go out and swing with a 25/25 and do just damage to someone's face. A lot of the times with this deck, there's so much focus is going to be spent on the puzzle of how do I draw cards, how does that person draw cards, people might just forget that, oh yeah, these big creatures aren't just there for card draw, they're there to hit people. And this really is just my favorite representation of that. And I feel like it just synergizes so well with the fact that we have a 5 CMC or 5 mana value, 10 power creature in the command zone. Now let's go ahead and jump over to the sorceries. With the sorceries, we have a lot of sorcery based ramp, just ramp in general. We need to ramp because Grothama is going to be dying a lot potentially, and we don't want to be taxed out. Thankfully, we're in green, so it shouldn't be an issue, but we're going to be ramping a lot. I think my favorite ramp spell in the deck, though, is just one of my favorite green cards in general, and I find myself putting it more and more decks, and it's Broken Bond. I've noticed that in most of the games I play, games are speeding up in Commander, and almost everyone has a turn 1 or turn 2 mana rock, whether it be the mana crypts or the mana vaults or jeweled lotuses or all of these ridiculous things that are floating around. I've seen them even creeping up more in what you consider more casual games, and it's hard to keep up if you're not also playing it. So someone who doesn't play fast mana, cards like this are a great way to counter that. Turn 2, blow up that soul ring, blow up that mana crypt. You don't even have to feel bad about it because shame on you for playing mana crypt, I say as I have one in the deck, and immediately get to drop a land into play as well. So the setback it is for your opponents and the jump forward it is for you, I love what it does. Early game, it does feel so bad sometimes if you don't have a target, but I can't remember the last time I sat down for a game of Commander and someone didn't have a turn 2 Signet or Mana Crypt or something going on. So I love what this does to kind of get you a little bit out ahead, because we have a very high CMC and we need to be able to jump ahead without the use of fast mana on a tighter budget. Now, the other thing in the sorcery slot that I really, really love are going to be the massive card draw effects and the massive ramp effects. I love Power Matters stuff. I play a lot of Power Matters decks, as you've seen, that I've built over the years, and having the Rishkar's expertise, Life's Legacy, Traverse the Outlands package to either draw an insane amount of cards without even worrying about a commander's effect, just taking advantage of the 10 power, or just throwing 10 basics into play to make sure commander tax will never be an issue again. I think one of the most interesting ramp spells in this deck that I wanted to put in, though, is Splendid Reclamation. This is so cool because we do have effects, whether it's our commander itself drawing cards or stuff like Greater Good or all of these different effects, where we have a Reliquary Tower, but we're not always going to draw it. There's a lot of times we're going to be discarding down a hand size, and you don't want to discard your spells. You're going to be discarding a lot of lands. Splendid Rec is very similar to Traverse the Outlands in this deck, where most times it's going to be 4 mana, get 5, 6, 7, 10 lands into play, and never have to worry about tax again, and just be able to play all of these big spells we're getting, because these explosive ramp effects are even better in this deck when we're going to have so many cards in hand. Really, our only limiting factor is mana. Now, jumping into the instance, there's obviously your instant speed interaction and stuff like that. I would say the most important instance in the deck are the protection spells, and I'm going to put them up on screen. They're going to kind of flash up as I'm talking about them, but different ways to give your commander indestructible instant speed, so you can make your opponent to waste their combat step, attack, fight your commander, give it indestructible, and all of a sudden they just you basically fogged their combat, because it doesn't kill your commander. They don't actually do any damage, and they're just stuck doing nothing. One of the most interesting ones, though, is Obscuring Haze. Most fog effects are not great in this deck because they stop combat damage, and when your commander's getting fought, it's not combat damage. But very specifically, Obscuring Haze stops all damage dealt from creatures. So this is going to be an insane effect in this deck, because yes, it's great if they decide to try to alpha strike you and all you have is your commander, cast it for free, stop damage. But more likely, when you have your commander out and people try to fight it, draw a bunch of cards, if you're not ready for that to happen yet, stop all damage from being dealt and make sure that you are the one to take full advantage. I guess it's the only one of the cheap or play for free spells that's cheap, which is great to see, and it is bonkers in this deck. And moving into the artifacts, I think the focus of these artifacts is going to be kind of punishing your opponents for getting greedy. We have some of the categories we've already talked about, stuff like a Conjurer's Closet to be able to blink your commander to draw cards, or a Darksteel Plate to make sure that it's indestructible and your opponents can't just fight it whenever they want to and make them jump through hoops. All that's always there. But I put a little sub theme in here that I really am interested to see how many games it can win, and I put a mill sub theme in here. Now, Mind Crank is kind of just the only straight up mill card. I just feel like because it's just universal for your opponents, just milling them throughout the game, you get this out early, it makes them have to think twice about just drawing 20 cards because it can get dangerous. But I specifically love Altar of Dimension. Altar of Dimension in this deck, one, it serves as a way to sacrifice your commander if you can't deal lethal to it and just need to draw 4 or 5 cards in a really dire situation. But more importantly, when you get stuff huge, beefy, you can fight your commander, draw a ton of cards, and if you want to, sack it, mill somebody for a bunch, and basically make them not be able to draw as many cards and not have that explosive turn. Because if you get some of these beefy creatures and keep hitting a specific opponent that's worrying you with mill, they can't just draw 20, 30 cards and not have the fear of milling themselves out, because they don't know what other mill you have in there. They're going to be a little bit more hesitant to do so. And again, the whole thing you're trying to do is they have this resource available on your board to draw cards. Make them think twice, throw off what they're doing, and try to mess with their heads a little bit. And I think mill does a great job of that. The last mill effect I have is Sword of Body in mind. This has a dual utility of protection from basically the two most powerful colors in casual commander, blue and green. So right away you can throw this on your commander and put someone on a 2-hit clock. It's a 12 pro blue green. Someone's gonna be playing those colors and you can swing through and do damage. And then it has the added benefit, you make a token, extra power on board to fight your commander and get card draw, and it mills someone for 10 every turn. Again, these are the type of effects where if you do this enough while your opponents are still getting set up, they won't be able to have explosive of a card draw turn, or if they do, they will be scared the whole time that you'll just be able to mill them out. And with the enchantments, we have some really cool enchantments in here. I think the two most exciting ones to me are Unnatural Growth, because one, it protects you in a weird way that your commander gets doubled power and toughness even on your opponent's combat step, so it's much harder to fight it and kill it to draw cards. But it's also just a great benefit of doubling up your powers, which is going to essentially double your card draw, which is ridiculous. And Druid's Call is also great. It kind of has that weird Saber Ants type effect where you're just going to throw 1/1s into play. And it's really, really nice because there are going to be times where, oh gosh, you just drew 20 cards. Your opponent's like, forget Grothama, I'm attacking you. And in a deck that has a lot of big, beefy creatures, having a bunch of just chump blockers can really, really be beneficial. But I think my favorite enchantment in here, kind of a hidden gem that I feel like would be great in here, is Fortitude. Fortitude is one of my favorite cards in Titania, and we're running so many basic forests in this deck that it is going to be insane in here. Essentially, you can just sack a forest to regenerate a creature. So if all of your opponents are trying to fight your Grothama and kill it and draw all these cards, just at the cost of a single forest, with all the ramp we have, it won't matter. You can stop Grothama from dying, keep it on the battlefield, and stop your opponent from drawing cards. It's really, really powerful to have, and it just keeps coming back. So once we get this out, we're in a really good spot to make sure our opponents are not going to benefit when we don't want them to. Getting into the lands, because it's a fairly budget deck, which is, I guess it's, you know, relatively speaking, it's a budget deck. I went very, very basic heavy. I think it's like something like 29 forests. There's only a few non-basics that I wanted to run in here, and it's for good reason. Got stuff like Witch's Clinic, which just super powerful effect to give a 10 power creature lifelink. Because our commander, we're not so concerned with it staying on tap. We can kind of swing away with it as people don't have enough blockers to kill it. Gaining 10 life a turn isn't bad. I love Sanctum of Eternity. Again, it gives you the ability to bounce your commander on your turn to draw cards if you don't have enough mana to kill it, or if you don't want to kill it and you don't want to pay tax, just draw a handful of cards, bam, bounce it back. You can replay it for the same amount. And obviously it's just it's a good situation to be in. Now, Reliquary Tower is in here. I didn't go overboard with like the no maximum hand size effects. I only have the one mainly because I wanted to run Splendid Reclamation. I really love this synergy of just drawing like your whole deck, discarding a bunch of lands, getting all your mana into play, and then just being able to cast all your best cards. But it's also one of those deals when you're drawing so many cards, you're more than likely going to see Reliquary Tower. If you notice that you really want no maximum hand size more often, you can go ahead and get the Thought Vessels and the other one that I'll put on here that I forgot the name of, and get that more often. But at the very least, Reliquary Tower is going to give you that. But that's going to wrap it up for all the categories. Now let's get into the best part of every deck tech, in this case the wormiest part, and it's that game winning step. How are we about to win the game with this deck? And the primary way, I don't know if it's surprising or not, you're just punching people in the face, and that's what I love about the deck. You're playing big creatures, you're getting big creatures out, you're ramping hard. You got Grothama, which is a 10 power commander with enough trample abilities in this deck to make sure commander damage is a real problem. I think the card draw and the mini game of Grothama will distract people enough to really let you get the secret game plan, so to speak, of just punching people with giant creatures, and I love that. And I honestly think nothing going through the deck list, I don't think anything represents that better than the Moss Bridge Troll, or one of my favorite cards of all time, Berserk, which can be a weird removal spell as well as a buff spell and everything. But the single greatest one is a relatively new card called Exponential Growth, and I'm looking down at this because I always have to read it every time I talk about this card. It's green XX, and you double target creature's power X times. Yeah, it does say that. So with something like Grothama and all the mana we're going to have, you give it trample. That's just game. Exponential growth. This thing is going to be so arbitrarily large, it won't matter. Someone's just going to get knocked out if we have any sort of trample on board. Some of our bigger creatures already have trample. We're running stuff like Ghalta. It's going to get silly. The exponential growth, I think, is the best representation of the big stompiness, and I absolutely love that. Now, second way to win the game is going to be by punishing your opponents for getting greedy. And the first representation of that for me is that Psychosis Crawler. I already talked about it earlier, but Psychosis Crawler is just a 1-card win in this deck if we have our pieces set up. And the fact that it does it to each opponent means you can knock the whole table out at once. It's absurd, and I really think it's probably the biggest remove on site card in the deck for your opponents. It's incredibly powerful, and it's a cool, weird way to use it. I've never seen this in a mono green deck before, so I love where it's at. Now, the last way to win the game is going to be the way plan C. It's a plan A and B, then plan C, and that is mill. I do think having that mill threat is so important. I only put maybe 3 mill cards in the deck, and we're never going to focus on it, but not having the threat of mill allows your opponents to draw cards with no threat of anything bad happening. Essentially just draw cards unpunished. And we have so many protections in place to stop our opponents from drawing cards. We don't want that to happen. We don't want them to just, oh, they made it through our defenses, they're good to go. It's that last ditch effort to be like, you got greedy, now I can punish you for it. And while it won't happen much, it'll be such a satisfying way to win games. That's gonna do it for this week's deck tech. I really hope y'all enjoyed it. It was so much fun brewing this. This was one that took me a while to brew. I was going back and forth for honestly weeks with the deck list, messing with it, goldfishing it, and honestly just really love where it ended up. It's one of those cards that's been on the back burner for so long. To actually sit down and brew it was wonderful. Let me know in the comments below, are there any commanders you've had like that for years that have intrigued you, you've never had a chance to build, and you finally, after such a long hiatus, dove into it? I know the Scarab God was the same way for me. It took me years to build that, turned into my favorite deck, so I love getting a chance to do that. As always, a huge shout out to the patrons. We really love and appreciate y'all so much, and just thank you so much for believing in what we do, and hopefully we get a chance to do more of these patron shout out, patrons center deck techs. It's really always a good time. So much stuff to come in preparation for Magic Summit, so we'll have plenty of new videos and announcements to come. But until then, I'll see y'all next time.